Good afternoon, Team Liberation. So today we're going to be talking about spring map testing and everything we need to know in order to be set up for next week's map testing. If you look around, I am in my hotel room here on the EOY trip in DC. You can see there's a nice picture of Lincoln Memorial in front of me. But let's go ahead and get started. So for today, we're going to be looking at explaining the school-wide grade level and student goals for spring map testing, so we're aware of the goals and we know where we're headed. We'll be looking at the schedule for spring map testing and seeing so that you have a clear idea of what this will look like. We'll revisit testing protocols and procedures, and finally we'll plan for investing students in spring map. This is the last set of tests for the year, and so we need to make sure that we're doing all that we can to plan for that difficult challenge of being the last round of testing for the year. I have two quotes here I want you to read that really is getting at why map is important. So take just 30 seconds or so and read over these two quotes. So, I have to pick a Ben Franklin quote because I'm a history nerd, but when I see this quote and thinking about without continual growth and progress, such words as improvement, achievement, and success have no meaning, I really think about the fact that kids are in our classrooms since August working really hard. You all have been working hard, and overall, they have been working really hard. And so that growth that's possible on this map test should absolutely be happening and should absolutely be very motivating for kids, because this is an opportunity for them to show all that they have learned throughout the year, and they definitely have learned things in your room. They've definitely learned things since August, and this is their chance to show that. Now, the outcomes for today, the agenda for today. We talked about the outcomes, why map is so important. We'll look at our current data and the goals for this spring. We'll look at the proctoring plan and the schedule. We'll look at accommodations and what we'll be doing for our S3 students, and then finally ending with investment. So, jumping right into the current data and goals. So when we think about map data as a general overview, there's two main data points we're focused on this spring. One are the student growth goals, that's represented by the arrow on the right, and one is the college ready goal. So what are these? So the college ready in the circle here, the college ready are students when students are achieving at approximately the 75th percentile or higher compared with their peers nationally. So saying this student scored higher than 75% or more of his or her peers on this particular test. And why this is called college ready is the NWEA, the organization that does MAP, has done a lot of statistical analysis to say if they're in the 8th grade and they're scoring in the 75th percentile, they are most likely, if they continue on that same trend, prepared for when they're in a junior or senior in high school of scoring a qualifying score on the ACT that would be a good score for getting accepted into college. So that's where that college readiness number comes from. It's based on predictions of their ACT scores later on when they're in high school. Now, on our right side in the arrow, the growth goals. This is students meeting or exceeding their tiered growth goal. Well, what is their tiered growth goal? Well, at the beginning of the year, they took MAP back at the beginning of the year. And from that data point, NWEA makes what's called a tiered growth goal for that student. And that growth goal is based on what amount of growth do they need to make by the spring in order to be either maintaining their maintaining grade level or even making up grade level. So let's pretend we have a 5th grader who in the fall scored at the 3rd grade level in reading. The tiered growth goal is a goal that is set to make sure that that student is gaining ground on getting on track for grade level. And so this is actually a more rigorous goal than the NWEA also does what's called a typical growth goal. A typical growth goal says this is how much a student would typically grow in the year. Well, for us, we're pushing for the tiered growth goal because it is not enough for some of our students to just make the typical growth, especially our students who are already behind. If they just do a typical amount of growth, they are going to stay behind. I'm going to say that again. If our kids are only making typical amount of growth and they're already behind, they will stay behind. And so it's important that we shoot for this tiered growth goal because that is the goal that factors in how students can achieve enough growth to get themselves back on track towards grade level. Now, specifically for Liberation, for our college ready, our goal is for this year for 30% of students in the school to be at college ready. The goal for the region and the goal for our school by 2020 is to have 50%. Now, just a side note here, our 8th grade last year actually already met this goal. So our 8th graders last year had 50% of their students scoring in college ready. Now, for our tiered growth goals, our goal is that for 5th grade, 65% of our students are meeting their tiered growth goal. For 6th grade, our goal is for 70% of our students to meet their tiered growth goal. For 7th, 75, and 8th, 75. This is where I would ask you to pull up the sheet that I put in your mailbox a few weeks ago and I've emailed out now, but says very specifically where you and your grade level and subject were on the winter MAP test towards making this goal. So, for example, if we're looking at G6 here, we had math. 29% of our kids were on track to meet their tiered growth goal. Remember, our goal is 70, and so we need 41% more of students to get on track, or 44 kids to get back on track to meet their tiered growth goal. In reading, we had 50% of kids meet or be on track for their tiered growth goal. We need 70, so that's 21 more kids that need to get on track for meeting their tiered growth goal. So, now moving on to proctoring and scheduling, because yes, we can talk about the data all we want, but the data will not happen if we don't proctor appropriately. Like I said in the beginning, this test is all about growth. Kids have absolutely grown in your class. There's no way they have not grown this year from the amount of work that you and they have put in. And so we must have a proctoring and a system and a schedule that ensures that our students are able to show that growth on that one day that they're taking that test. Testing can be very unfair sometimes because it is a snapshot, and so we need to make sure we're doing all in our power to make sure this is an accurate snapshot so that we're proctoring and scheduling appropriately. So with that said, we are going to try a few different things this time. Last spring, the 8th grade and some of the other grade levels did a proctoring plan that seemed to have great results. Our 8th graders last year scored off the charts. So woo, go G8. Let's do it again this year. And we hope to replicate much of that success across the school. One of the things that they did last spring was that they only had 2 proctors at a time, so that 2 people, and last year I believe it was mainly Mr. Mendoza and Mr. Wen, they were able to hone in and become really great proctors and really become, again, experts at proctoring. So we'll have 2 proctors per grade level team. We'll have 1 enrichment team member as the test manager, the person who runs the computer and does, pausing and resuming the test, etc. And we'll have 2 3-hour testing blocks per grade level per day. Why? Again, this was great success last year. Secondly, Chromebook distribution. This means that we'll have less kids all on the network at the same time, so it hopefully runs smoothly. And these proctors will get to become experts at proctoring. The MAP test, which we've seen has been really beneficial for students showing the most growth. So what are the implications of this? So no enrichment means there's no enrichment because the enrichment team are going to be those test managers. And so no enrichment means that we'll only have 1 planning period per day, so that your Energizer will be your only planning period for next week. I will apologize for that, but I also want us to recognize that this test is too important. And so yes, we're going to ask you to put in an extra hour of work each day to ensure that kids are showing the growth that we already know that they have achieved, and so they can be recognized. Now, 2 content teachers will teach 4 1.5-hour classes each. So I'll show you the schedule next and it will make a lot more sense. But while the two grade level team members are proctoring, the 2 other content teachers are teaching 4 lessons to the other cohorts. So that's 2 classes of his or her own content and 2 classes of one of the other proctor's contents. The MAP proctors, it's not like the content teachers are going to have to make up those lessons on their own. The MAP proctors are responsible for making 4 1.5-hour sub-lesson plans for the week. Let's dive into an example of what this will look like on 7th grade. So, if you see here, we have, let me move this a little bit. So we have, we're going to start pretending I am a proctor. So proctors for G7 would be Mr. Carver, Miss Kofi, and Mr. James will run the test session. So you see there's 2 3-hour blocks for testing. And so for the first block here, Mr. Carver and Miss Kofi would have 2 of the cohorts. Then they have Zen, then they have lunch, and then in the afternoon they're going to have another 3-hour block. Now this one is chunked up by Energizer slightly, but in this other 3-hour block they will have the other 2 cohorts for testing. So block 1 for testing for 2 cohorts, block 2 for the other 2 cohorts. Now, Meanwhile, Ms. Simpson and Mr. Rowland will be the content teachers.